Imagine inventing a game so complicated and pointless. It turns millions of casual sports fans into spreadsheet-obsessed sociopaths. Every fall, millions draft fake teams, watch real games, and somehow destroy actual friendships. This is the story of fantasy football, the most passionate unpaid job in America.
You ever wake up and realize you care more about a fake football team than your real family? Congratulations, you're either in a fantasy league or a cult. Possibly both. Fantasy football is the only hobby where you can lose sleep over a pulled hamstring on someone else's leg. But how did we get here? Managing imaginary teams, screaming at real humans, tracking injury reports like you're some kind of orthopedic surgeon. To understand this madness, we have to go back to a simpler time. A time before spreadsheets, before fantasy football apps, before your coworker Dave thought he was a sleeper pick savant. Stay with me, because once we get through how it all started, I'll bring in 4 self-proclaimed experts who've sacrificed relationships, credibility, and most of their Sundays to bring you advice you can't unhear. But before we do, which injury had you losing the most sleep? Top draft pick rehabbing in Germany? QB concussed with a hip issue? Drop your fantasy injury nightmares in the comments below. Let's talk about it, and then pretend we're fine. Because at least the real players are.
Fantasy football began, as many terrible ideas do, among men with too much free time and a chalkboard in Oakland, California.
In 1962, a man named Wilfred Bill Winkenbach, an Oakland businessman, part-time Raiders executive, and full-time spreadsheet romantic, decided real football wasn't complicated enough. He invited 2 journalist friends, Scotty Sterling and George Ross, to a hotel room in the middle of the season. The goal? To invent a game where they could pretend to outcoach the coaches and never have to leave the bar. And so, in a smoky room of the Manhattan Hotel, Billy Wink and company created the first fantasy football league, the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Prognosticators League, or GOPPPL, because nothing says fun like an acronym that sounds like a sinus infection.
In a smoky Oakland hotel room, 3 men gathered around a table to create a new kind of football, one played on paper and powered by stats.
The Bachman's friends look lost.
Draft real NFL players, score points based on their game stats, and crown a champion.
And instead of just watching games like normal people, let's spend hours adding up numbers and arguing over starters. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how fantasy football was born. A glorious excuse to obsess over statistics instead of your actual life.
Each team manager drafted real NFL players. Points were awarded based on actual game stats, passing yards, rushing touchdowns, interceptions, and just like that, the illusion of control over a chaotic sport was born.
Imagine pitching this in 1962. Okay, fellas, we're going to make fake teams using real players so we can score imaginary points and feel emotionally validated for 6 months. And instead of kicking him out, they made him commissioner. And if you're now a commissioner, congratulations. No need to haul out a chalkboard to convince your friends this was a good idea. Their fantasy is your fantasy. Check the description for everything you need to make their dumbest dreams come true. Draft boards, trophies, football-shaped chip platters. They'll pretend to love you forever. And when you buy through our links, we make a little too. League fees aren't free.
Points were awarded weekly, tracked manually by poring over newspaper box scores. To submit a lineup, you called in by phone. It was fantasy football with real effort.
Before ESPN apps and auto drafts, you had to call someone and say your team out loud. And if your quarterback got injured, tough luck. There was no waiver wire, just depression and a long walk to the fridge. 3 dudes in a hotel room invented fantasy football. But what happened in Oakland didn't stay in Oakland. It exploded into magazines, toll-free phone contests, and eventually the internet, which means people who'd never heard of spreadsheets before now worship them like holy relics.
In 1987, journalism students Ian Allen and Bruce Taylor launched the first national fantasy football magazine called Fantasy Football Index. It hit newsstands and quickly became the go-to for draft rankings and strategy. By 1990, major newspapers, Arizona Republic, Los Angeles Times, Miami Herald, and others rolled out fantasy contests like Pigskin Playoff or Dugout Derby. Participants dialed toll-free numbers and entered 4-digit player codes each week. Top scorers often won trips to Hawaii. During this time, league scoring was wildly inconsistent. Some leagues gave points only for touchdowns. Others awarded bonuses for long scores or non-traditional plays. Some prints encouraged leagues to award 25 points for a safety just because they could. Commissioners tabulated scores manually. For many, Monday and Tuesday were spent poring over box scores in USA Today or other papers, pencils and calculators in hand.
So, imagine, before apps, you had to call in your lineup like ordering pizza, and if your safety scored a touchdown, you might just win the week. Mathematical chaos.
The real turning point came in 1997 when rotonews.com, later known as RotoWire, made waves. It was the first site to offer real-time, searchable player news updates. Suddenly, fantasy owners had breaking info on injuries, trades, benchings, not from Monday's paper, but instantly online. In 1999, Yahoo launched its free fantasy football platform, offering full league management to anyone with an internet connection. No magazines, no phone calls, just click and play.
That was the moment fantasy football shed its basement-dwelling, newspaper-scoring roots and became every fan's excuse to avoid paying attention to actual football.
I wrote that wrong. Do not lock it in.
Great! You fried the modem again.
This was fantasy football before smartphones, painfully analog. Tension, misdials, dial-up, and somehow still less toxic than a group text thread today. What happened after Yahoo took fantasy football mainstream in 1999? Suddenly, everyone who once ignored football became an obsessive lineup setter. Fantasy fandom didn't just rush 3, it blitzed.
Is this healthy?
It's cardio for my emotions.
By the mid-2000s, fantasy football wasn't a hobby, it was a lifestyle. And that altered how we watch football forever.
If I start him, I'll lose. If I bench him, I'll still lose.
Today, ESPN Fantasy Football is the leading platform with over 13 million users in 2024, up nearly 10% from the previous year, and tens of millions more across platforms like Yahoo Fantasy. But it's not just those numbers. Fantasy players consume significantly more NFL content per week. Average fans watch about 6.6 hours. Fantasy players stay tuned for over 8.
That means for fantasy players, every game matters. You're not watching your team. You're watching multiple games to track half your roster.
Yes! Touchdown! Wait, your team just scored on your defense. We don't talk about this.
Fantasy football created massive digital communities. Reddit threads, podcasts, and analysis shows shifted from team pride to player performance loyalty. Fans cheer for players, even when they're on rival teams.
You might still root for the Chiefs on Sundays, but if your fantasy kicker lines up for a game-winning 60-yarder against them, you're suddenly cheering the other way. That's fantasy. Fantasy crept onto TV and into pop culture. Shows like The League, a sitcom about friends obsessing over their fantasy teams, prove that ruining friendships over imaginary points is great entertainment.
If you draft my sleeper, I'm deleting your expense reports.
Try me. I charged your card anyway.
Fantasy leagues built traditions, loser punishments, cash pots, and mock trophies. They became office rituals. Nearly every workplace had one by the 2010s.
Your boss asking who to start for Monday night became a full-blown business meeting. Fantasy had co-workers obsessing over stats like their careers depended on it, bonding over quarterbacks already doomed at kickoff. It's also changed the NFL's cash flow. Fantasy players spend more money on tickets, merchandise, and NFL media than non-players. The NFL noticed, so they leaned into the obsession.
Look at that, he's projected for 23.6 points.
Are they winning the game?
What game?
Broadcasts now integrate live fantasy stats into game coverage. ESPN's Fantasy Football Marathon airs dozens of hours of draft advice and expert projections. Ticker tape fantasy scores scroll beneath live games.
So you're watching on any given Sunday, but you're staring at fantasy scoring streaming across the bottom instead of the game. Congratulations, you've been sacked by the trap.
Victory never tasted so imaginary.
Let's meet the folks feasting on that imaginary victory. These 4 experts have lost friends, dignity, and Sundays. To give advice you definitely shouldn't follow. Stick around. It's about to get ridiculous. Gary has 3 fantasy football trophies. 2 are in his living room, the 3rd still in police custody. Care to explain?
I brought a live goat to the awards banquet. Greatest of all time, right? The goat ate half the buffet, charged the bartender, and somehow swallowed my trophy. Now it's evidence.
And you're still in the league? Talk about low standards.
Fear wins leagues. Exploit bye weeks, hoard dome kickers, and never say sorry, especially to bartenders.
That's championship-level thinking. From goat wrangler to mind games maestro, here's Lisa. Lisa, you once said fantasy football is 80% mental warfare, 20% football.
And I was being modest.
This should be fun.
Convinced my opponent to bench his top running back by texting him a fake injury update. He believed me. I won. We got married 2 years later.
He clearly married up.
If you want to win, get in your opponent's head. Bonus points if you're there rent-free.
And remember, love is temporary, but trophies are forever. Speaking of people who make poor life choices, meet Dave. He claims he's never once checked his lineup during a game, which is either impressive discipline or a complete misunderstanding of how fantasy football works.
Back in 2009, I went undefeated, then lost in the playoffs because I benched my best player for a guy I thought had more upside. That upside was food poisoning.
So, your secret to success now?
Make your lineup decisions early, then walk away. Somewhere without internet.
All right, 1992, here we come.
Or the forest.
Great advice. Toby, your draft board is inflatable?
12 feet tall, baby. Floats in the pool. Draft day's not a meeting. It's a festival. Last year, by round 5, half the league forgot who they even drafted because we were doing cannonballs between picks. I still finished dead last, but I was the only one rocking a perfect tan.
Losing gracefully and with chlorine in your eyes.
If you can't win, at least throw the best party they'll never remember.
Nothing says memorable like a championship hangover and a sunburn. 4 managers, 4 strategies, 0 normal behavior. They could have just told you to stock up on receivers and running backs, stream your kicker and defense, and never trust the first trade offer. Got wilder stories, smarter tips? Pitch them in the comments. I could use new material to judge, and peek at the description for those links to help you survive the most passionate unpaid job in America.